Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today's case is on Kyle Byrtus. Kyle was born on May the 17th, 1988. He grew up in Florida and was basically an all-round good kid. He was an honor student and co-captain of his school cross-country team, and this was at Fort Myers High School. He competed at state. He clearly towed the line at home, as he also travelled on mission trips with his church. In 2006, he graduated from high school, not only gaining a college scholarship, but he also received an offer to run cross-country at the Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. It was here where things started unraveling for this budding young athlete. In his first year, he started to become disconnected. He just wasn't himself. His trips home became more sporadic, and he complained that life at uni was a lot harder than he had imagined. I think he found life at college extremely challenging, and it seems he struggled in silence. Through my research on Kyle, I wonder whether, having always easily come out on top, especially in competitive sports, having always been used to being in the limelight, whether he was knocked for six, finding himself competing alongside other equally great athletes. Perhaps for the first time in his life, others were giving him a run for his money. Was he suddenly finding it difficult to outshine others? It was at college where he began taking oxycodone. He later progressed to heroin. At some point, he became a dealer, and when he sold drugs to others, he would keep a portion for himself as payment. It is likely that he stole items like speakers and small electrical goods to sell at pawn shops. His mum suspects that he took some of her jewellery in exchange for drugs. Needless to say, he had turned into a fully fledged addict. Things really nosedived for him. He was put on probation as a result of low grades, and by the end of his first year, he ended up losing his scholarship. Basically, everything went to pot. He quit cross country and ended up dropping out of college. Can you imagine how he must have been feeling at this point? To me, he's just defeated. He's just totally given up. You know, I often look at cases and wonder, how did this person's life unravel like this? Where were the support systems? Why didn't they get help? Because Kyle, he had everything going for him. He has a very loving, supportive family. He had friends. He was popular and he clearly had great talent. I think we all have choices. It's the way we look at things in life, in our lives, and it's the decisions that we make that lead us to where we get to. So, by now, this is 2008. He went back home and he moved in with his parents. They had set rules and naturally expected him to toe the line as he had always done as a kid. Except things were different now. He had his own ideas on how he wanted to live his life, and I think, like most teenage or 20-something-year-olds, he probably used his family home a little bit like a hotel. He'd go off for a couple of days at a time and didn't really give his parents any idea where he was off to or what he was really up to. Eventually, he decided to move back to Boca Raton, and he got a job at a restaurant. I mean, it was a far cry from his high-scoring cross-country athletic days. However, he stuck it out for the preceding 3 to 4 years. It shows he was wanting some form of steady life. He was living in a nice apartment with some friends. His parents were still in his life. He'd stay over occasionally with them. So this time things were smooth and easygoing. In January of 2012, his best friend, Spencer, who he had been at school with and grown up with, Spencer was so concerned about Kyle's drug use that he asked his own mum to ring Lynn. Lynn is Kyle's mum, which she did. And Lynn admits that at the time she was turning a blind eye to her son's addiction. Though in time she came to realize that some of the things that he did were as a direct result of the drug use. One of them being that he never stayed long enough when he went to see them, because of course he'd soon start going into drug withdrawal. I believe his parents did everything they could possibly do for him. After finding out that he was in a bad way, his father and brother-in-law drove to Boca Raton and brought Kyle home. We have to keep in mind that Kyle was in his mid-20s and he was his own man. He point blank refused to go to rehab. Had he acquiesced, would that have sent him down a better path in the years following? Or would he have eventually fallen off the wagon? Who knows? Whilst he had no intention of seeking help for his drug addiction, he did accept moving into his grandparents' home, and that way they could keep an eye on him while Lynn was at work. He carried on doing his best. He got a job at another restaurant, and he also worked at a lawn care service. There is no doubt he was doing all he could to keep it together. Naturally, though, he started wanting a bit more freedom. He'd take a bus to friends' houses, or he'd go to movies. As he was working and earning his keep, his mum asked him to pay rent money to his grandparents. I think this is absolutely right. In any other situation outside of family walls, he would always have to pay rent. So the fact that his mother was expecting him to contribute, even just to the water and electricity bills of which he was using, it makes perfect sense to me. I guess what? He refused. He's clearly hot-headed. He upped and left and went and stayed with friends. He's the master of his own road, and he mapped it out with his own decisions. But in a real shocking turn of events, after sofa surfing at his friends' places for a while, he ended up on the streets, living behind a gas station near the restaurant where he worked. These are, sadly, choices he made for himself. He has a loving family who wanted him happy, healthy, and living safely under their roof. But it wasn't to be. He had so many highs and lows. He got himself sacked from his job in May of 2013. He decided to move to Pine Manor, where he briefly lived in a tent in the middle of a big field. I gotta take a pause here and just ask out loud, what would lead me to consider this a feasible choice if I were in his shoes? What would possess any of us to live in a tent in the middle of a field? Not overnight, nor a camping trip, not for a bit of fun, but as a life choice. Obviously there's nothing wrong with living in a tent, but the point is, he'd started off years prior being the best at his sport, winning scholarships and getting places at great colleges. And then drugs, man. Well, I should mention that Pine Manor has a small community in South Fort Myers with a crime rate that is 34% higher than the national average. So, it didn't surprise me to then read that within weeks of this, he was arrested for petty theft in a Walmart. He called his mum from jail and asked her to bail him out. And like the best mum out there, she told him that she would, but only if he agreed to go to rehab. He could have said yes, but he lost it and he shouted at her down the phone, "I'm your only son. How can you do this to me? You don't love me. I never want to talk to you again." And he hung up the phone. That was the last time they ever spoke. His mum had said that she looks back at that and says, what if I had bailed him out? What if I had been able to help him out some other way? Was tough love really the way to have gone? As she goes through it over and over in her head, even though she knows that she can't do anything about it now. While in prison, Kyle told his uncle that he was worried about his belongings, that they might get stolen from his tent. So, Lynn's brother-in-law went to check them out. It had been raining and everything was wet. He had a framed photo of himself with his great-grandmother. She and Kyle had been best friends, and she had passed away at 103 years of age in December of 2011. And in his tent he also had a Bible and a few other mementos. That's all he had. In July, Lynn's brother-in-law, he'd often go and drive through Pine Manor looking for Kyle. He came across him one day and Kyle said, "Tell Mum that I say hi and that I do love her." In August of 2013, Lynn drove 12 hours to Mississippi with her husband to visit his son and family. But just after they arrived, they were informed of Kyle's passing. And so both Lynn and Kyle's stepfather, they left immediately. And they drove back home. So, 25-year-old Kyle Byrtus' body was found in a field on the outskirts of Fort Myers, Florida, in Lee County. And he'd been shot. his mum has been fighting for justice for 7 years. She's honest and direct about Kyle's lifestyle and the problems that he encountered in the years leading up to his murder. It is her strong belief that there are people in the Pine Manor community in South Fort Myers that know what happened to her son. For this case to be solved, those people need to come forward so that she can finally find justice for Kyle. His body was found in a field in a desolate area of Lehigh Acres. It's a small, unincorporated community in the Cape Coral and Fort Myers region. There was heavy rain when Kyle's body was deposited, and due to decomposition, detectives said there was not enough evidence left to pinpoint who was responsible for the murder. After a few years of no one coming forward with information, the case quickly went cold. Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers mailed nearly 5,000 postcards to residents of the Pine Manor community, hoping someone would know what happened, or in the very least would recognize Kyle's face. Many questions about Kyle's death remain. It is unclear whether he died at the scene where he was found or elsewhere. These are questions that haunt his family and remain unanswered. Kyle's mother believes that he was shot during a drug deal gone wrong. She knows he owed money to a lot of people. She said the one detective did mention that he learned more about the heroin trade in Fort Myers investigating Kyle's death than he ever wanted to know. Police have Kyle's phone and his backpack, but Lynn wonders what happened to his other belongings and where his clothes are. She learned that Kyle had been living in a duplex with several other people at the time of his death. When police arrived at the duplex during their investigation, it was empty. Lynn said it had been wiped completely clean. Lynn's created a Facebook page, and it's called Friends of Kyle Byrtus, where she shares information and asks for tips. If anyone has any information or leads in this case, please contact Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers at 1-800-780-8477. You can remain anonymous, and there is a $3,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest. The family also has a GoFundMe account to help raise money for a reward should anyone come forward with information that could help solve this case. If you have any information on the unsolved murder of Kyle Byrtus, please call the Lee County Sheriff's Office at 239-477-1000, or you can email them at coldcase@sheriffleefl.org. I will put all these details